Just over a month ago now, we visited Six Flags New England for the very first time, and while we missed some of the credits, one credit we didn't miss was the Wicked Cyclone. Wicked Cyclone was a ride I have been anticipating for years now, and it did not disappoint. However, how does this compare to Wildcat's Revenge, an RMC I rode the day before this one, and is it even the best in the park? Here's my full review of Wicked Cyclone. Let's go through some background before we get into the layout and categories. Wicked Cyclone is a smaller RMC. When you pull up to the park, it is barely visible, and from the park paths, it's pretty hard to see until you get close. When entering the park, you must take a left from the park entrance to head through Crack Axle Canyon. The way Six Flags New England is set up is that it's a narrow path with a long path running horizontally. Wicked Cyclone is at the north end of that path. It's the last coaster on that side of the park after Thunderbolt, Pandemonium, and Flashback. Wicked Cyclone opened back in 2015, replacing the old Cyclone wooden roller coaster. It stands just 109 feet tall, with a speed of 55 miles per hour. It has 3 inversions and over 3,320 feet of track. So it's not a fast, tall, or long ride. However, this thing packs a punch. After entering the queue right under the structure of the coaster, you wander around the structure before reaching the station building. There is little theming, but for Six Flags standards, it's not too bad. There are different vehicles and debris from a cyclone, and riders are part of a storm chasing team nicknamed Chase. From what I noticed, the operations were slower than other RMCs, and the restraints took a very long time to release. I don't know if that was normal, but it was for every cycle we had on Wicked Cyclone. Now, let's talk about the layout. After dispatching from the station, riders take a right-hand turn and enter the steep lift hill. This lift hill is pretty slow, but gives you a great view of the park, as this is at the very back, so you can see all of the coasters ahead of you. We rode this second thing after Flashback, so it was nice seeing everything the park had to offer, even if our experience at the park wasn't the best. Riders drop at a 78-degree angle, a mediocre drop on an RMC, but the restraints don't staple you as much on this ride, so almost every element feels a lot more aggressive. There are elements on this coaster that are so powerful that it actually might be too aggressive. You'll see what I mean later in the layout. After the nice floater-filled drop, the train powers through an overbank turn. This overbank doesn't have any laterals, but strong and sustained positives throughout the element. Then comes the first of 4 off-axis hills. Yes, 4. And all of these off-axis hills are extremely powerful, even more powerful than Storm Chaser's Airtime Hills, an RMC that is notoriously fast-paced. This Airtime Hill throws riders to the left in a forceful ejector hill. The shaping on some of the hills in Wicked Cyclone feels off, in a good way. The apexes feel much sharper than other RMCs, especially in that second half. Riders rise up into a 0G stall. This is nothing like Wildcat's Revenge's stall, but it is still pretty good. You can feel yourself being caught by the restraint before twisting back to normal. But this is actually my least favorite inversion on the coaster. After twisting out, the train goes over a small overbank turn that doesn't really do much. As much I love this coaster, the pacing isn't as great as other RMCs. This and a couple of moments in the second half don't do a whole lot. However, this ride is still extremely fun all the way through. The riders ascend into the first half of a double down. The first Airtime Hill is extremely powerful, especially in the back cars. The way this hill is banked as well causes some weird laterals into the element. However, that's not all from this element. The train rockets down the second half of the double down, whipping riders in the back down in the most aggressive airtime moment of the first half. Following is another aggressive airtime hill that throws riders into their restraint through a sustained floater moment. As I said, the shaping feels a little off where it throws riders especially hard into their restraint. Now, this is where the ride enters the second half. In my opinion, the second half is even more aggressive than the first. Guests experience a lateral-filled left-hand turn before ascending into the second outer banked moment on the coaster. This one is super powerful and sudden, as riders can't see this element coming. In the back cars, riders are whipped out of their seats. The ride continues turning into the second inversion and my favorite on the ride. This is like a traditional RMC 0G roll, but much floatier. Like the stall, you can feel yourself being caught by the lap bar. This differentiates it from the faster RMC rolls. Following is the most aggressive, normal airtime hill on the ride. I say normal because there is a particular element coming up that really makes this ride special. However, this airtime hill ejects riders out of their seat. Following is the most mediocre element of this whole coaster. This moment is right over the entrance of the coaster, and it's just a series of bank turns that wave in and out of the structure. It's an okay element, but I feel the company could have done something better. However, they nailed this next element. The third outer bank style element is by far the best on the coaster. It's a super sudden element and is the strongest and whippiest on probably any RMC. It violently ejects riders both laterally and upwards, causing a super strange airtime moment. The third inversion isn't as slow as the previous inversion, but it is just as good. It's basically the same element with the same forces. Wicked Cyclone enters one last turning moment before the last outer bank. This one is most similar to the second outer bank. It has some weird shaping to provide a super strong ejector moment that no one is expecting. Finally, the ride turns into one last aggressive airtime pop before entering the brake run. Wicked Cyclone has some super aggressive airtime, probably the most violent I've experienced on an RMC. Let's go through some categories to grade the strengths and weaknesses of Wicked Cyclone. First, the drop. Wicked Cyclone has a mediocre drop. While all RMC drops are good, this one is very short. It does provide decent floater up front and sustained ejector in the back cars. I give the drop a 7 out of 10. Next up is airtime. Wicked Cyclone is an airtime focused ride. There is a ton of airtime moments. All of the airtime moments are super violent and full of sustained ejector. There's really only one floater airtime hill in the whole ride, right after the double down. This is an easy 10 out of 10 for airtime on Wicked Cyclone. Pacing is where Wicked Cyclone lacks a little bit. While some sections, like the beginning of the ride, are pretty well paced, there are sections where the ride doesn't do a whole lot, most notably the turn before the death hill and the last couple of turns. These turns are just kinda there to take the train to the next element. Also, while this doesn't hurt the ride experience at all, you can feel the trains run slower than other RMCs in the second half. So Wicked Cyclone will get a 7 out of 10. The transitions are up next, and some of the transitions on this ride are absolutely insane. All of the transitions are super smooth, and some absolutely launch you out of your seat, most notably the outer banks in the second half of the ride. In addition, some of the turns can cause some laterals. Transitions get a 9 out of 10 on this ride. They aren't as whippy as some of the other RMCs, except for the main outer bank turns. The penultimate category is inversions. Wicked Cyclone has 3 great inversions. The first is a floaty stall with good transitions, the second is a super floaty and hang time filled roll, and the third inversion is basically the same as the previous one. In my opinion, this RMC has some of the best inversions. It combines whippy moments with more floaty inversions. 9 out of 10. Finally, we have intensity. Compared to rides like Wildcat's Revenge or Outlaw Run, this is not as intense. But this ride isn't about the intensity, and it's about the floatiness and crazy outer banks. There are some pretty intense laterals, but as for positives, there aren't really any except for the first overbank turn and a couple of sharper valleys. 6 out of 10. Now for my final thoughts on Wicked Cyclone. I rode this the day after Wildcat's Revenge, and while I still prefer Wildcat, it is super close. This ride places in 5th place for me, with Skyrush in 4th and Wildcat in 3rd. That means that Wicked Cyclone places above some of my favorite rides ever, like Dragster, Maverick, and The Voyage. While Wildcat's Revenge is more about a variety of forces, especially positives and laterals, Wicked Cyclone has some of the strongest airtime on any coaster out there. Some of the transitions and negatives feel too powerful, especially in the second half, and it has some floaty inversions and turns to mix up the airtime experience. I loved Wicked Cyclone, and I did think it was better than Wildcat after I got off. After some thinking, I realized that Wildcat's Revenge is overall a better coaster, but I highly recommend visiting Six Flags New England just for this coaster, even if the rest of the park isn't anything special. As for the best coaster in the park, Wicked Cyclone absolutely blows Superman out of the water. I might do a separate review for Superman, but the restraints absolutely ruined that ride. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Comment what you think of Wicked Cyclone, and have a great rest of your day.